Hello, everyone. This is Rick Miller and my Week 6 presentation titled To Expand or Not Expand? That is the question for the EPA. Now, I chose to look at the Environmental Protection Agency as a federal entity and with the idea of whether or not it's best for the federal government to control our environmental policy, or should lower levels, for instance, states, have their control over themselves as opposed to the Environmental Protection Agency dictating what each state, um, what their objectives would be as far as environmental protection, and whether it's good to expand upon what the Environmental Protection Agency does currently, or whether we should decentralize that and limit the federal power over states. Now, when looking at those that would argue that uh, it is good to have the federal Environmental Protection Agency oversee and dictate the policies for all states, um, I initially looked at the very theory of Weber and bureaucracy and its systematic formation of organizations, in which this was also which he expanded upon from Taylor's theory of scientific management, and the idea of one best way of doing something, and you do that you do it that way so that to maximize the output. Now, with the federal EPA, what they do have is a hierarchical command structure. You get directives from the very top, the president, and that in turn is disseminated to the chief of the Environmental Protection Agency, and those directives work their way down the chain of command. And now what we also see with those that are in favor of one centralized controlling entity, like the federal government over the EPA, we also have essentially the EPA is considered to be autonomous, essentially. Their functions are efficient, and all states must abide by it. Now, this is also the idea of cooperative federalism, in the fact that you have states and the federal government working together. Why is that? Well, I think in large part it comes down to the hierarchical structure, and the fact that as a country, one policy or a few policies directed from the top, disseminated to all the states, helps control the message essentially. And that also, we have that bureaucratic structure, and which also leads to Article 2 of the Constitution, where the President of the United States is allowed to appoint the heads of departments. So this essentially leads to later theories in bureaucracy and what we see now with what Lowy is discussing is the fact of you get special interest groups that come into play. I I don't believe that that's what people intended to want to follow was what special interest groups might be pushing, and pushing it through the president, and in turn pushing it through the federal government. But that in essence is where we stand right now. So, in short, with the federal government, you have one optimized hierarchy of command, and the states essentially follow the lead of the EPA. Now, then, there are those that feel the EPA should step out of the way. The fact that states know more about what their needs are rather than the federal government. For instance, you can't, what happens in California certainly can't apply to, say, Maine or another smaller state that geographically and size-wise are completely different. So you get this idea, you get the idea initially with those that believe the state should be in control of their own laws and regulations. It sort of leads to initially what Follett would argue that free-flowing ideas based on a state's needs rather than what the federal government might believe. And this also ties into the theory of dual federalism, where we have a separation, that the federal government does not intermingle with those ideas and opinions of the states. And then you also have to address what that the theory provided by Alice Rivlin, and decentralization is good for states. Also allows those people that believe states should be able to dictate what they believe to be in their best interest, not what the federal government might believe. It simply allows for states to really do what they feel is best for this state. And I guess when we look at Rivlin, we also have to look at Herbert Kaufman and his idea that citizens of the country feel that the federal government is not adequately addressing their needs, and they should be able to address their own problems and, in essence, minimize the bureaucracy and again go to that dual federalism where states will handle what they need to handle, federal government handles what they have to handle. But I think everybody working towards the same goal, just with different ideas. And so these are my references. And in closing, who could do it better? Is it the federal government? Is it states? That opinion is basically, it's interesting when looking at the federal government, most people believe federal government. Let's, in regards to the EPA at least, let's let the federal government dictate what states should do, and not really minimize the federal government's role, but essentially keep it in place and keep it where it is. So that is my presentation. Hope you enjoyed. I apologize, it ran longer than it should have, but thank you.